In this edition of the Weekly, we've got Medicare updates, how to become a client, what in the world is SoftBank, and why that matters to you. Coming up next. All right, everybody. My name's J.O. I am the author of Maximize Your Medicare, this book here. It was published in January of this year. You can get it on Amazon.com. Thank you so much for all the great reviews that you've posted. Now, today, we're headed up into the Medicare annual election period. And I know a lot of people, they simply come to me, they come to this channel, you've searched me, et cetera, et cetera. They've come to this channel specifically for Medicare reasons. And I can get all of that. That's just the way that our society basically tries to pigeonhole people and roles and stuff like that. The reality is that's a small sliver, which is why the thumbnail, the cover picture of this video has that red letters in there, much more than Medicare, which is that, Medicare for me is just a simple exercise of financial planning. So I'm going to try to draw this diagram first before we get really into the guts of today, and I'm going to just draw it for you. All right. So basically what happens here is we're just going to draw this simple little graph here. And this is just a simple graph. And here's your net worth as a household. So now you're sitting here at this number and whatever your net worth is, here's where you are. Okay. The issue about healthcare and the reason that I'm involved in healthcare and health insurance, right, and trying to explain to you the differences between healthcare and health insurance, let's just start there, is if you get sick and you don't have proper protection for whatever your particular situation is, you are subject to this, right? A steep decline in household net worth. And it's as simple as that, right? It's as simple as that. So reality is in order to counterbalance this effect, what do you need to do? You need to have this, right? Something that goes in the equal and opposite way. If this happens, do you see what I'm saying? In other words, what I'm saying is that if your net worth declines precipitously as a result of this, okay, we need the opposite, equal and opposite, which is this. That's the function of health insurance. Now, up on your screen right now, I put up this very complicated formula. This is something, guess what? That formula happens to describe this. It does. It's the singular formula that does this. Now, why does that relate to this channel, my messages, all my other videos, all of them? It's the single unifying theme, which is this here is described by the formula that you see on your screen, which happens to be an option. So, look, if it walks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it's a duck. This graph is your duck. That formula, right, describes the price of the duck. That's it. And you can understand now, this same exercise applies to a lot of different situations. A lot, right? Every situation every financial situation, candidly, has this unifying theme. And the reality is that when I'm looking at all these different topics, whether it be, IRA, Roth conversions, individual health insurance, what's good and bad about short-term health insurance, what's good and bad about dental, what's good and bad about long-term care insurance, it has to do with the fact that I'm trying to get my clients the sharpest up to protect them from the sharpest down, right? This tells you basically the fact that, this book right here, this book just happens to be the topic that connects persons when they're turning 65, that you can get the sharpest up for the lowest price at the best possible, most important time for people's retirement planning. Now, let's say you're 55. You're not close to your Medicare age, right? Okay. That doesn't mean that the channel is irrelevant, because all of this stuff also applies to what else? Life insurance, your portfolio. And we're going to get into, right? And that's why you should watch these different segments of the video. It's the unifying theme. You can see it, which is that I'm going to talk about SoftBank and the fact that, the equity market's down, that, the high flying tech stocks down 10% in a blink of an eye. Why? Because the market participants were involved in stuff that looked like this. They were. That's a fact. And now the fact that people don't know about this tells you how big the disconnect is between everyday people, whether you're looking for your Medicare solution or you're looking to maximize your household net worth, whether or not you're trying to, get long-term care insurance. It goes to show you that people are trying to get to the end point, and they just want the answer. They just want the answer. And I get all that. But the reality is that you need to be able to understand how you got to the answer. So when something changes, you'll know how to adjust. The fact of the matter is we've got big reasons for change. What are they? Demographic reality. 62 odd million people are on Medicare, 10,000 people a day, something that won't change for a decade, right? Fiscal reality, enormous amounts of debt that we have at the federal government, and increasing as a result of the financial, assistance required as a result of COVID-19. All of that and more. Now, connecting to me is pretty simple. The reality is you can make your first connection here to me by looking at your screen right now. This is maximizeyourmedicare.com, which is the website for the book. All you need to go is to go to Enrollment Central, or you can go to click the hashtag AskJ, either one of those two, and you send me a simple email. Okay. The email will connect you. And here on YouTube, a special offer, which is that if you're new to me, you can just go in there and anywhere in there say, I saw the YouTube video. That will make your first connection with me for free. Okay. And you can ask me whatever question you want. The reality is I'm going to respond within 24 hours. I'm going to tell you if your question is so complicated that you require comprehensive financial services or not. If you have simple boilerplate, I need to adjust my Part D plan, I need to adjust my Medicare Advantage plan, I'm looking at Medigap, your cost is zero. The reality is that we can figure this out. I can figure this out in, not very much time, and will fulfill my fiduciary responsibility to you, which is you first. I mean, that's basically what fiduciary responsibility is. And the reality is I can tell you about the backstory here. I get compensated by the carriers at a rate I don't determine, right? I've got no say. And, yes, are there sales incentives and this, that, and the other for different carriers? I don't pay attention to them. And, for whatever reason, I've been blessed, I suppose, to some degree. I've been to these places where these trips are. So it doesn't matter to me. And the reality is that our client base, my client base is so diverse that I can't really pay attention to. I'm too busy, to be candid with you, off a 0.5% of, commission difference, per person. Not relevant. What is relevant, however, is getting you to the right spot so that you can get to this at the lowest possible price for you or your household. For some of you, this is complicated, and you need to go and see the other videos, because the reality is that I haven't really provided this explanation in a very good way. I've kind of hinted at it, partially, a la carte, but that is the unifying theme. And the reality is the little snippets about, and you can see it here, the street.com up on your screen. Here's a copy of, an article, as well as, my videos that I show. I've been a guest on the street.com on their retirement platform, and you can see me in other platforms, around the country on the internet. The reality is that, people are coming to me for snippets, and I can understand that. I'm saying that all just kind of ties back to this. It really does. This is what you're naturally exposed to. I'm trying to get you to this. It's that simple. It's that simple. And it's simple and complicated. We'll get to that in one of the other segments when I talk about SoftBank. So we've got not a very fun version of See Me After Class today. And what it has to do with the, the formula that I'm showing you, and it has a lot to do with Medicare. And in this specific instance, not sure. Anyway, one of those, in this particular example, basically what happened is I got an email, and this email comes from Gus, writing in, an email from California. He wrote to me asking me my opinion about Medigap carriers in California. And he wanted a ranking of those carriers who are going to be likely to increase rates in the future. So rather than Gus or California specifically, I'm going to first address the specific answer as far as California goes. Number one, it doesn't really matter in California. And the reason is because there's something called the birthday rule, meaning that it is an exceptional state, doesn't exist in every state. But if you are a Medigap policy owner, you can switch on your birthday rule as a result of the birthday rule every year around your birthday. There's certain date limitations. I help people manage this. So literally, the future doesn't really matter because your future is only a year. So, the reality is that if the carrier that you're enrolled in stops becoming competitive, you can simply change carriers every year. No restriction. Okay. So it's actually not a relevant question. Okay. And that was the entirety of my first explanation to Gus, which is like, look, you can be asking this question. Do you understand that your question is not relevant for California? It's entirely relevant in Texas, where this rule doesn't exist. Texas, Florida, most of the other states in the nation. Okay. But Gus remained undistracted and still wanted to have, some kind of listing in order. Okay. So there are limits to what I do. Okay. One of them is, no, I'm not going to be providing lists in writing on the future. You're asking for a crystal ball. Okay. I don't have one. Anyone who suggests to you that they have one is first of all, that's a blatant untruth. Blatant untruth. Okay. Pants on fire untruth. Okay. There's no way to predict the future rate increases of Medigap carriers in the future. No way. Can I get implied Implied, imperfect predictions, yes. Are they my opinion? Yes. Does that mean that I'm going to write them down on a list where you're going to hang me off that email response after I press send? There is no chance that I'm going to do that. That's a disservice to you. That's entirely a disservice to you. It leaves me liable. Okay. And the reality is that I don't even know if other agents do this. And I don't care. I'm just here to tell you, right, that this question isn't a valid question. The first part wasn't valid because it was California specific. The second portion, the principle of it, is also wrong. It has to do with the formula that I've been talking about for the first segment of today's video, right? You're talking about a projection into the future. Here's what can go wrong. Here's your list. Number one, the carrier can change business policy, meaning that even if I had the implied questions and their implied practices, which make me suggest carrier number 3 versus carrier number 4, right? And let's just say I had them in this order. There's nothing to say that these two businesses will not change their commercial business practices to flip the order in the future. So now, on day one, you're going to make me put this in this order in stone. That is not the way this works. Okay. So totally wrong as far as the principle. And you can hear me getting me animated, right? Because it is so out of bounds. So the second portion of this has to do with the formula you see. This formula has to do with the probability function of the normal distribution. And what is that? In fancy person's talk to everyday talk, it's the bell curve. The bell curve is showing something of great uncertainty, right? For example, let's say, for example, in these two carriers, 3 and 4, all the healthy persons went into 4 and all the sick persons went into 3. Guess what? My order in the future would be wrong. Why? Because of some other random event that attracted all the sick persons to the carrier that I would have suggested in writing, which in the future would create the flip order. So you can see what I'm saying here, Gus. And here is the reason that you get the See Me After Class award. Is that if you don't stay on track to the principles that I've been saying here on these videos, right? Is that I'm giving you the path that I'm looking at financial matters to get you to the best payout. That is true. That said, there's a limit. And if you exceed those limits, I have to stop conversing with you. And for that, see me after class. Okay, so we have had kind of a record stock market run. And the reality is that, for much of the last month or so, we've seen straight higher in the big names, Apple, Microsoft, Tesla, grabbing all the headlines, and we've just seen, buying. We take a look at this article and, we see this was dated August 19th. And it has to do, the record market explained. The New York Times, they're asking this person, Andrew Ross Sorkin, noted journalist, right? The author of books, a book called Too Big to Fail. One of my favorite books about the financial crisis is The Reality. Not as in-depth as I would have liked, but, very, very good book. Don't get me wrong. And this person, you can see him on CNBC. I would call him, very close to the top of the class as far as business journalists go. I don't think there's any question about that. And here's his kind of understand how the market could have been doing so well among amid economic devastation. And here we go. Basically these 5, reasons stock market is forward looking. The big get bigger. Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, betting on a vaccine. The only game in town, help from Washington. None of these is wrong. Okay. None of these is wrong. So that's the first thing I want to say. It's not to say these aren't plausible. They're not plausible. Okay. Meaning that are all of these elements reason to backfit the explanation on what has gone on here in equity markets since the low in March. And, this is kind of true. No question about it. Now, what degree each one of these plays, is unknown. And here's the point of this segment. What what you're being told, the average every day, including myself, right? I don't get to see the cash flow of the largest investors and their rationale. All we see is prices as they have gone higher, inexorably higher. Well, that was true until the very beginning of this month. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to another window, and it is, here. So now let's fast forward here to just after Labor Day. And what we have in the New York Times is the following email that I received called Deal Book. You should subscribe to it. It's good. Anyway, it's by the same person. You can see it here, Andrew Ross working. There he is there. September 8th, debrief call, blah, blah, blah. What did SoftBank do? NASDAQ futures are down sharply again. So basically the NASDAQ has dropped 10% from the all-time high. And you can see here a quick catch up, blah, 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 and now here we go. SoftBank aggressively bought billions of dollars worth of call options on tech stocks, essentially betting those shares would keep rising. That forced firms that sold SoftBank these options to hedge their risk by buying the underlying stocks. And as those stocks kept rising, they had to keep buying to stay hedged. Want to sound like a trader? The dealers were buying because they were short gamma. And guess what? Here's the point of this segment. You need to ask yourself, do you understand this paragraph at all? At all. Can I explain it to you? And the next part, after you take the quick break, I'm going to show you what this actually means. Okay. For some of you, the answer is going to be, I don't understand a thing about this paragraph. Not a single term do I understand. That should tell you something about what sits in actual professional investment markets. It looks and feels nothing like the article I just sent up by the same person less than 3 weeks ago, less than 3 weeks apart. Nothing has changed from that article. Not a thing. Nothing. Nevertheless, now all of a sudden, this backfit story has a very, very different tale. There was some other explanation. And, here's your wife's tale. I saw this explanation 2 to 3 days prior to this article. And it was one of the very few tweets that I actually, so I belong to Twitter and I scan Twitter just to see what's going on there because, it's kind of like you're looking for a little kernel in a field of some marginal piece of information that doesn't sit there in the mainstream. Okay. For the overwhelming majority, and by overwhelming, I mean way over 99% of you, you have no idea what this paragraph means. No idea. Yet this article, the point of this article showed up on a tweet a couple of days prior to the sell-off. And like, now this narrative doesn't match those other 5 points from August 19th and is an explanation. So you can see now all of a sudden the backfit story has a very, very different set of explanations. The story would look entirely different, meaning one part. So there it goes, right? So there are two then morals to the story. We'll get to what an actual delta and gamma actually are in a few moments. But number one, the narrative that you're being told may not actually be the narrative that is actually driving markets. So an everyday person has a very difficult time understanding what is actually going on. And number two is that this can't happen in foreign exchange or in overall fixed income markets. It can't, even as big as Apple is, right? This stuff can affect the stock market, which has a ripple effect onto the indices. That is entirely true, right? Because of the way the indices are constructed. My point being that stocks then, especially individual names, can be pushed around by big institutional investors on a singular basis, pulling the rest of the market along for the ride. Two, not one, but two different facts that don't get sit in the public mainstream about explanation when they're trying to tell you why the market is doing this or that. Just a cautionary tale. We'll get on to the technicals of what this paragraph means coming up next. I find this funny, right? You can see this fairly complicated looking formula. To the math persons out there, this is not that complicated. That is the reality, right? And so when people say, okay, Jay, you're like this math geek, blah, 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 that's actually not the case. Not at all the case. But you do have to understand kind of what this is actually saying. And this is, you remember the article that said about call options? This is then the formula for a call option on a stock. And it could be Apple, it could be Amazon, it could be the S&P 500. This is the generalized form of a call option. Well, what you see here is something called ND1. And let's just draw a circle around it. Let's see if I can, manipulate this correctly. Let's see. Okay, so that's very ugly. But you can see this thing here. This thing that I've drawn in purple is ND1 times ST. So ND1 is, in fact, this big formula down here. That's just the bell curve. That's all it is. So what does this do? ND1 is the delta. So you can see from the previous article, which is that, Mr. Sorkin pointed out that the dealers had to buy the delta amount of stock in order to hedge their delta exposure of call options that they sold to SoftBank. But as the stock continued to rise, there is this thing called gamma. And what gamma is the second derivative of the delta, of the call, right? So the rate of change of delta increased, meaning that the gamma increased, meaning that the sellers of the call options to SoftBank had to buy more stock, thereby pushing Apple higher. Now, guess what? The last 3 minutes, almost none of you understood what I was saying. And that's quite the point, right? The point here is when you're involved in financial markets and sitting there, with your pom-poms out, going, yay, hooray, look, I'm right, the market is higher. There are these other factors that you don't know what the theoretical basis is, right? So you have no explanation when it goes the other way. You have no explanation going when it goes the other way. All you know is price is higher, meaning that complacency kills, right? You're sitting there going, look, I'm right, and there's my backfitted evidence, just like that article on August 19th, right? Exactly, right? Which is stocks higher, now let's backfit the explanation. Yeah, but there was something else going on here. Here's your evidence. It's a cautionary tale on the fact that, there are other forces that don't get explained to you in the press. They don't get shown to the everyday investor. Like I said, most of you have, turned your ears off to the explanation about what actually delta is or gamma is, right? Your takeaway then, if you don't follow it, is simply that there are other forces that you don't see. And so what you also then need to be diligent. Just a word of caution. That's all I got for today. Be sure to register for Medicare ABCs, the virtual event coming up in less than a month. Spaces are limited and they are filling rapidly. I'm afraid we're going to run out. We're going to run out very shortly. Be sure to follow the link. It's in the text. In addition to that, be sure to subscribe and like the video and the channel. I'm Jay. Speak with you next time.